Welcome to Sleep with Myth. Close your eyes and let the world fade away. Tonight we drift beyond time, where gods dream and stories remember their light. Before there was rain, there was silence. The desert stretched endlessly, a world without breath, without rhythm. The sun hung above like an unblinking eye, watching creation dry and crumble beneath its glare. And yet, somewhere beyond the veil of the horizon, the sky began to ache. From the heart of the heavens, Tefnut was born, the daughter of Adam, twin to Shu, sister of air, mother of moisture. Her first breath was a sigh against the endless drought. Her first tear was rain. It fell upon the dust like a heartbeat returning to a dying world. The earth shuddered and then sighed in relief. Where the tear touched, rivers formed, and where rivers flowed, life stirred once more. Tefnut descended upon the land, her steps leaving ripples of silver light. She was neither storm nor flood. She was balance. The pause between dryness and deluge. The soft whisper that says enough to both flame and tide. But with life came yearning. The mortals who rose from her waters began to forget gratitude. They prayed for more rain, even when their rivers were full. They shouted her name in desperation, then cursed her when the floods came. And so the goddess learned her first lesson. Even the purest gift, when given too freely, becomes a burden. In the stillness between the first storm and the next dawn, she stood beneath the open sky and looked upward, toward her father, Adam. "Must I always be both mercy and wrath?" she whispered. The wind carried no answer, only the dry breath of her brother Shu, the air that moves but never weeps. And so, Tefnut closed her eyes. Her second tear fell, this time not of compassion, but of sorrow. That single drop struck the sand, and from it rose the mirror of her heart, a shimmering lake that reflected both sky and earth, chaos and order. It was the first pool of balance, the heart of her domain. And the desert listened, for the first time, to the sound of rain. The lake that Tefnut had created shimmered beneath the morning light, a living mirror between heaven and earth. Clouds gathered around its edges as if drawn by an ancient memory. The first reflections of the gods looked down into it, and for the first time the heavens saw themselves. Tefnut stood at its heart, the water circling her feet, her golden hair damp with mist. The wind, her brother Shu, whispered softly through the dunes, carrying fragments of a forgotten song. He had no tears, no warmth, no rain, only motion. Yet in his breath, Tefnut heard the loneliness of all things that move but never touch. She smiled sadly. "Brother," she murmured, "we are two halves of one rhythm, you the breath and I the sigh." Shu did not answer, but the air trembled around her, folding like wings around her form. In that trembling, she felt Adam's distant light, their father's eternal gaze. She wanted to rise and meet it, to show him what she had made, but the earth clung to her feet, heavy with need. The mortals had begun to gather at the shores of her lake. They came with offerings, clay vessels of sand, carved wooden idols, prayers murmured into the water. Some knelt in reverence. Others demanded storms, harvests, or vengeance. Their voices rose like waves, drowning the silence she cherished. Tefnut watched them and felt her balance tilt. She saw in their eyes both devotion and greed, love mixed with fear, gratitude tangled with desire. And she knew again that the greatest weight upon the gods was not what they gave, but what was expected of them. The lake rippled. It began to show not only the reflection of the sky but of hearts, their hidden tempests, their thirst for control. In those trembling reflections, Tefnut saw that mortals no longer prayed to honor creation. They prayed to command it. Her tears began to rise once more, not to fall. They lifted upward, forming clouds of silver mist that shimmered above her head. And when she spoke, her voice rolled across the desert like distant thunder. "You cannot possess the rain," she said. "It comes because the world remembers its thirst, not because you demand it." The mortals fell silent, their voices caught between awe and fear. Some knelt deeper, others fled into the sand. Tefnut turned her gaze to the horizon, where the sun burned fiercely, and for the first time she saw her own reflection within its blaze, a mirror of light within flame. She understood then, balance was not stillness but motion in harmony. Every storm, every drought, every drop, all were part of the breath that kept existence alive. To keep the world whole, she would need to let it learn. And so, she began to walk again, not toward the mortals but toward the horizon. Wherever she stepped, the air shimmered, and rain followed in quiet rhythm. Behind her, the lake remained, the first mirror of truth, holding both peace and reflection for all who would dare to look within. The years passed like ripples fading on still water. The lake that once shimmered with silver light had begun to dry, its surface cracked beneath the weight of a merciless sun. The mortals who had once prayed to Tefnut turned instead to fire and wind, forgetting the quiet mercy that once nourished them. Their temples fell into ruin, their songs into silence. And far above, in the unseen reaches of the heavens, the goddess watched. Tefnut's eyes were not clouded with anger, only sorrow. Her tears had ceased to fall, for even grief must rest. In the balance she had built, absence too had its purpose. And so, she let the earth thirst, so it might remember the taste of rain. But the drought went deeper than soil and stone. It reached into hearts. It hollowed laughter, it cracked faith. The mortals began to fight over the dust, blaming the gods for the emptiness within themselves. From the horizon, her brother Shu whispered, "Sister, they do not learn." "I know," she answered softly, "but they must feel the stillness before the storm if they are to understand balance." The winds carried her words across the empty desert. Even the sun faltered for a moment, as if listening. She descended once more into the mortal world, her form woven of mist and fading memory. The people did not recognize her. To them, she was only a shimmer in the heat, a trick of the eye, a ghost of the air. Yet wherever she walked, shadows deepened, and the scent of rain returned to the wind. At the heart of the desert, she found what remained of her first temple. Its stones were broken, its pool dry. Yet in the center, one small vessel remained, a single clay jar sealed and untouched by time. Tefnut knelt beside it. Her hands, luminous and trembling, lifted the jar, and for the first time in an age, she wept again. The tears struck the clay, not in sorrow, but in remembrance. The jar broke, and from within rose a single drop of water, her own first tear, preserved by the faith of one forgotten priest who had refused to let her name fade. Tefnut smiled. This is enough. She released the tear into the wind, and the skies opened. Not in fury, not in flood, but in balance. Rain fell softly upon the sleeping earth, waking rivers, stirring seeds, cleansing memory. The mortals ran from their shelters in awe, faces lifted to the heavens as they tasted the first rain in generations. They did not know her face, but they felt her mercy, and Tefnut, standing at the edge of her reflection, whispered, "Even the heart that forgets love must thirst before it can feel again." The rain that Tefnut had released spread like memory through the land. Rivers awoke, seeds stirred beneath the soil, and for a time the world remembered harmony. But balance once found is never still. From the deep horizon came a new sound, the murmur of gathering clouds, the whisper of wind turning heavy. The storm was coming, not as wrath, but as truth. Tefnut stood at the peak of a weather-carved hill, her golden form cloaked in mist. Each raindrop that fell carried her reflection. 1,000 shimmering eyes, all weeping and watching. Her brother Shu's voice wove through the air. "Sister, they rejoice now. The earth is green again. Why does your heart not rest?" She looked down at the mortals below. They were singing, laughing in the rain, yet already their greed had returned. They hoarded the water in jars, argued over rivers, and cursed when the floods reached their doors. Tefnut's voice trembled like thunder. Because they love the gift, not the giver. The sky darkened. Lightning brushed the horizon like the stroke of a god's hand. Tefnut lifted her arms, and the clouds obeyed. She did not summon vengeance. She summoned remembrance. Winds spiraled, fierce and tender, carrying the scent of her tears. The storm spoke in her voice, deep and resonant. "You cannot command what was never yours. The rain does not serve, it shares." The mortals fell to their knees as the tempest grew. Towers cracked. Rivers overflowed their banks. Yet amid the chaos none perished, for the storm's fury danced around them, never upon them. It was not destruction. It was cleansing. Tefnut's tears merged with the rain, forming a great veil of silver light. Through it, she glimpsed her father, Adam, radiant and still. His gaze was neither praise nor judgment, it was understanding. He spoke through the wind. "Daughter of breath and balance, do you see now? To teach them harmony, you must first live it." Tefnut bowed her head. The storm quieted at once. Thunder dissolved into silence, leaving only the soft rhythm of falling rain, the voice of the world remembering its song. She turned to Shu, whose invisible arms encircled her in calm. "For every storm, there must be air to carry it," she said gently. "And for every heart that breaks, there must be one to remind it why it beats." Her brother nodded, unseen but felt. Together they watched the horizon, where sunlight began to pierce the retreating clouds. And as the first rainbow arched across the sky, Tefnut smiled, not in triumph, but in peace. When the storm faded, silence fell once more. not the silence of absence, but of peace. The earth, cleansed and glistening, exhaled softly as if in gratitude. From the soaked sands, flowers began to rise, fragile, radiant, brief. Tefnut walked among them barefoot, her steps leaving small ripples of dew in the soil. Each drop that touched her feet sang faintly, the memory of every tear she had ever shed. And above her, the clouds parted. From the heavens descended a silver thread, a stream of light winding endlessly across the sky. It was the river beneath the sky, a path of souls, of dreams, of forgotten prayers drifting toward eternity. Tefnut looked upon it and understood that rain was not merely water returning to earth. It was the memory of every life that had risen, loved, and passed away. She reached upward and touched the stream. It shimmered, and voices echoed within it. The laughter of children long gone, the hymns of priests who once called her name, the soft breathing of every creature that had ever rested in her shade. For the first time, she felt not sorrow but belonging. Her tears did not fall. They rose, joining the river, merging with the rhythm of all that was. Adam's voice came to her like sunlight through water. Daughter, you are not bound to the storm nor to the drought. You are the flow that connects them, the river that knows both fire and silence. And Tefnut bowed, her heart glowing with understanding. The mortals below saw her gesture not as humility, but as a promise. They began to rebuild their temples, not from stone, but from gratitude. They learned to give back to the earth, pouring water where none flowed, singing not for favor, but in remembrance. At night, the river of light above reflected their offering. Every lantern, every prayer, every breath of wind carried a shimmer into the sky. The heavens glowed, and Tefnut smiled. For the first time, balance had found its mirror not in her tears, but in the hearts of those who had once forgotten what rain truly meant. The world no longer thirsted. The rivers flowed freely, the skies breathed in harmony, and the wind carried songs of gratitude. Yet Tefnut felt a quiet unease, not of sorrow, but of knowing. For even balance, once found, must be guarded with care. Beneath the calm horizon, shadows began to whisper. Mortals, once humbled by the flood, had begun to forget again. Temples grew larger, offerings more lavish, and prayers more demanding. They had learned reverence, but not remembrance. Tefnut stood on the edge of the sky, where rain becomes light. Her reflection wavered upon the silver river she had created. In it, she saw her other self, calm and kind, but also fierce and infinite. "Have I done enough?" she whispered, and the reflection answered in silence. From behind her came a familiar presence, Shu, her twin of air and breath. He spoke softly, his voice carrying the scent of the dawn. "You cannot hold them still, sister. Balance is not peace. It is motion. Even the wind must stir for the world to live." She turned to him, smiling faintly. "And what if I vanish when I let go?" Shu's invisible form shimmered with light. "Then you will become what you've always been, the breath between all things." Tefnut closed her eyes. In that moment, she felt the heartbeat of the world, the pulse of rivers, the rhythm of clouds, the sigh of the wind. And beneath it all, she heard something else, the echo of her father's voice, ancient and steady. You are not only rain, my daughter. You are balance itself, the thread that binds what falls and what rises. She knelt by the river of light, her tears falling into its glow. Each one turned into a small star, drifting upward to join the sky. The stars were her final gift, the balance made visible. They would remind mortals of the eternal cycle, that every storm ends in stillness, and every drought in rain. As dawn broke, Tefnut's form began to fade into mist. Shu reached out, his presence wrapping her in gentle air. She smiled as she dissolved into 1,000 droplets of light. Where there is sorrow, she whispered, there will be calm. Where there is drought, rain shall return. And when they forget me again, I will return as the breath that reminds them. Her voice lingered like dew upon the morning air, and for the first time the world understood balance, not as stillness, but as eternal becoming. End of The Tears of Tefnut, the goddess of rain and balance. Thank you for listening to Sleep with Myth.